So in today's video, we're going to paint this simple watercolor storybook scene. This illustration is based on a drawing that I made, and you can download that drawing for free so you can follow right along with me. At the end of this video, when the scene is all finished, I'll take a moment to explain my sketching process so you can learn how to draw like this too. So the watercolor effect that you see here is coming from the Forester paper texture. It's optional, but as you can see, it adds a lot of interesting texture that really suits this style. And for the brushes, I'm just going to use the ones in the regular watercolor kit, mostly just the abstract round. Now if I open the layers panel, you can see I've got the sketch already placed in here, and it's set to multiply. I've got the color palette as well. Just make sure the sketch is placed above everything and then set to multiply. And to start painting, I'll select a blank layer down here. So I'm going to do a long press on my color palette and grab that gray tone. I'm going to use the abstract round brush. And I'm going to use it at a pretty large size. And I'm going to very roughly fill out the silhouette of the jacket here, just as an example. Then I'm going to use the eraser brush, which I'm going to set to the fineliner pen. And I'm just going to erase it back so it follows the sketch a little bit more closely. If you've got areas where the color didn't fully cover the sketch, you can switch your brush to the water blender and just kind of pull it out a little bit, and then go back to erasing. And I'll fast forward this process in a minute, but there's one more step I want to show you. So for example, on the scarf, I'm going to grab the scarf color, and I'm going to make it on a different layer than the jacket, just a layer above. And I'm going to use the abstract round again to fill it in, just like I did with the jacket, and then cut it out with the eraser. And once that's done, I can open the layers panel, and here's the scarf and here's the jacket. I'm going to pinch those together, make another new layer, and basically continue the process, and I'll do this until every shape and color on the character is filled in. Now, in the case of these boots, it's really hard to cut them out because I can't see the sketch very well on the black boot. So what I'm going to do is just lower the opacity of that boot layer. Then I'll use the eraser to cut them out just like I did before. And then you can just turn the opacity back to 100% and then merge it with everything else, just like we did for all these different colors and shapes. And after the colors are all blocked out and all that's finished, I like to move on and do the textures next. So for that, I'm going to make a blank layer above my character. And I want the details here, the textures, to be kind of scratchy. So I'm going to switch my brush to a default Procreate brush in the drawing tab. It's called Freycinet. It just has a really nice scratchy, chalky kind of look. And as an example, I'll add some texture to the hat. So I'll grab the local color here, maybe brighten it just a little bit. And then using that Freycinet, maybe even a little bit brighter still, I'll just use the Freycinet brush to add a very light, scratchy, kind of knitted texture to the hat. And I'm going to go through the whole illustration just like this and sparingly add a few surface textures, especially on the fabric elements. And once all the textures are done, I might lighten it a little bit just by lowering the opacity. It's optional, but I think in this case, a little bit lighter is better. And then I'll just pinch and merge it together with the original character layer. So at this point, the illustration is really coming together, and it looks good with the textures, but it's very flat. So I'm going to move on and do the shading. And to do that, I use the selection tool set to freehand. And I'm going to use the jacket as an example here. So I want there to be a shadow just underneath the scarf here. So I'll select that area. Then I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'm just going to selectively darken that. And that's a simple shadow. But here we've got a little bit of a different situation. This arm is behind the torso. So I'm going to use the selection tool to sort of select just in front of the torso here. Hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'm going to brighten it a tiny bit. Then I'm going to select the other side of that here and I'll darken it. And always in my head, this feels a little bit like I'm kind of shaping or carving a block of wood. At least that's the analogy that's always worked well for me. And I'm going to go through the whole illustration and add some shadows and highlights, just like this with the freehand selection tool. And for the last shadow here on the neck area, I'd like to make a soft shadow, so I'll select it like this, and then I'll feather it out, and then darken it. And finally, once the shading's all done, I can move on and start adding details, and I'm going to start with the face. So for that, I'm going to make a new layer above the character. For the brush, I'll go back to the regular watercolor kit and just use the fineliner pen. And I'm going to use this on the face and use just a variety of skin tone colors to kind of carefully fill this out. Now the nose is a little bit tricky, but I'm still going to use the fineliner pen. I'm just going to use a sort of warmer, darker skin tone, and I'll roughly fill it out. Then I'll change my brush to the water blender, and I'm just going to kind of blend out the base of the nose to create this kind of ombre effect. And then I can use the eraser brush, kind of just like I did in the first few steps, to cut it back so it fits the sketch again. And sometimes with the sketch on, it's hard to see the face details clearly, so I'll just turn it off for a minute and just check and make sure everything looks okay. I think the rosy cheeks need to be a little bit more red and a little lighter, so I'll just use the freehand selection tool just to select those, and I'll brighten them and saturate them. And after the face is done, I'm going to go through the whole illustration and add a bunch of small details with the fineliner pen. For example, like the shoelaces, details on the jacket, and things like that. And once the details are done, you can add some slight black outlines if you want to. I'm not a huge fan of outlines, but I think it looks good sometimes. For that, I'm going to switch back to the Freycinet brush, and I'll use pure black. And I'm going to go in there on the same layer that I did the details on, and I'll add a slight black line wherever I think the contrast needs a little bit of help. Now, once all the details are done, they're still kind of on their own layer, so I'm just going to merge it with the original character layer. And if you want, you can add some detail to the hair that I call splits. It's kind of a stylistic thing, but I'm going to use the eraser brush at a pretty small size. And I'm just going to make these very light lines, just erasing through. Then I kind of exit out the side of the hair. And this is a way to get a hairy texture without having to kind of spell it out and add a bunch of fine lines. There we go, and that pretty much finishes up the character. And I'm going to move on and quickly fill out the tree and the sled on its own layer. And I don't think I need to do this step by step. I'm just using the same process that I covered to do the character. I guess the only key difference is that I'm going to use the Freycinet brush to do the tree because it makes it look a little bit rough and scratchy. And I think this contrasts nicely with the smoothness that we have on the character. And just like that, this simple illustration is all done. Now in a minute here, I'll explain a little bit about my sketching and drawing process. But for now, check out this closer look at the final result. So believe it or not, this illustration started out as a colored drawing like this one here. And for my own personal workflow, it doesn't bother me at all when my original idea is kind of poorly executed like this. The key thing is we've got the major elements and the colors in there as well. Now after this point, I'll make a couple of iterations, just refining it and refining it not with color, just drawing with the pencil brush or something, just making the lines a little bit more clear. And then I'll make my sort of proof illustration, which looks like this. Sometimes I'll kind of warp the proof illustration to make it a little bit more balanced. And then once I'm really happy with how the proportions of everything are, I'll go over it one more time, very, very carefully, making a perfect ink outline. And that's how I made the final sketch that we used throughout this video. And if you want to go super detailed and learn more about my drawing process, I've got 2 videos that I think you'll like, and I'll put them in the pinned comment below this video so you can check those out. And that pretty much wraps it up. Please, if you think I've earned it, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks again for all your support, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.